Hello and welcome to the Beach House 34 True Crime and Paranormal Podcast. We are on episode 16 of the Steven Avery trial. And in the last episode, we heard from two of the first officers on the scene after Teresa Halbach's RAV4 was found. These were Deputy Peter O'Connor and Sergeant Jason Orth, both from Manitowoc County. You know, the same county that was being sued by Steven Avery for his unlawful 18-year incarceration. They were supposed to be pretty hands-off, yet, here they are. O'Connor testified that he got there pretty fast, but didn't really go near the vehicle. Orth, on the other hand, said that he talked to Pam Sturm right after her quote-unquote discovery, but neither of them verified the VIN number on the vehicle that was found. They both said they really couldn't read it. And that kind of, I was like, what? Pam had testified that she walked right up to the windshield and read what she could of the VIN number and even related to the police, which is why they were there in the first place, right? But the two officers, neither one really tried, even when they had a flashlight to see the VIN number. Why were they so sure that this was the right vehicle? Today, we're going to hear from Deputy Inspector Todd Hermann. He's a mid to upper level law enforcement officer. They usually rank above sergeant or lieutenant, but below a captain or a chief. So think middle management. And real quick, before we jump in, if you've been following this series and you don't want to wait for new episodes to drop, I've got you. Every single episode, including these trial episodes, come out a full week early over on Patreon. So if you're ready to stay ahead and support the show at the same time, head on over to patreon.com/beachhouse34. All right, let's get started with Todd's testimony. We're still on the last day. This is the last witness of the day, and Jason Orth has just left the stand. And the court asked Deputy Inspector Todd Hermann to take the stand. He's called to the stand, raises his hand, is sworn in, spells his last name, etc. And the direct examination is being done by Attorney Kratz, which, I got to thinking about this. The prosecution has several people at their table, okay? Several people who could get up and ask all of these questions. The defense, Steven has two, and each one of them kind of take turns asking questions of witnesses. But no, in true Kratz fashion, he's got to be the only one standing up there front and center asking all these questions. Now, does he do this the whole trial? I have absolutely no idea. But so far, it's only been him. Pretty big ego there. Yeah. Anyway, let's get started. Mr. Hermann, how are you employed? I'm employed with the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. And what rank do you hold? At this present time, I'm a deputy inspector for the department. On November 5th of 2005, what rank did you hold at that time? I was a patrol lieutenant in charge of the 4 a.m. to noon shift. On November 5th, do you recall receiving a dispatch call or direction to proceed to a property known as the Avery Salvage Yard? Yes. Did you proceed to that location? Yes, I did. And do you recall about what time you arrived at that location? It was approximately 11:03 in the morning. At 11:03 on the 5th of November, tell the jury what you did and what you saw. At that point, I traveled down Avery Road, had information about the Halbach vehicle missing, and that it was located by a search party in the Avery Salvage Yard. I drove down into the salvage yard near a vehicle car crusher where Sergeant Orth's vehicle was parked, and that's where I stopped with my squad. I met with Detective Remacher, and we proceeded down a path to where Sergeant Orth was. We proceeded towards the Halbach vehicle to identify it, to identify if there was anything in the vehicle. Detective Remacher and Sergeant Orth walked up to the vehicle, and I stayed just a short distance behind them, away from the vehicle. About how far from behind the vehicle did you stop? I was out of reach of the vehicle anywhere from 3 to 7 feet or so. My question is, were you close enough to see what Detective Remacher and Sergeant Orth were doing? Yes. Did you maintain constant visual connection with both the vehicle and with those two gentlemen at that time? Yes, I did. Did you see either Sergeant Orth or Detective Remacher either enter the vehicle or otherwise disturb the vehicle? No, they did not. If they did, would you have seen it? Yes, I would have. Now, Mr. Herman, on the property or at your location at the time, did you see a gentleman by the name of Lieutenant Link? No, I did not. Did you see a gentleman by the name of Sergeant Colburn? No, I did not. You certainly know those two individuals? Yes, I do. If they would have been there, would you have recognized them? Yes, I would have. After Sergeant Orth and Detective Remacher completed their inspection of the vehicle, did you see what they did? Yes, they walked back out away from the vehicle towards me, and we walked away from the vehicle. Okay. What did you do then? Sergeant Orth, as we were walking out, I had Sergeant Orth stay within view of the vehicle. He was approximately 30 feet away from the rear of the vehicle so he could maintain visual contact with the vehicle and make sure it wasn't disturbed. Myself and Detective Remacher walked up away from the scene back towards where the squad cars were parked by the vehicle crusher. Are you familiar with the term scene security? Yes, I am. And which officer was primarily responsible for securing the RAV4 or maintaining scene security at that time? When we left Sergeant Orth there to maintain visual contact, he was mainly in charge of watching that vehicle. I guess what I'm asking to clear up for the jury is, that was Sergeant Orth's primary responsibility from what you knew at that location? At that point, yes. And that's what I'm asking. At that point, yes. Was that responsibility, that is, scene security, sometime shortly thereafter turned over to a different department? Yes, it was. Which department was that? Calumet County Sheriff. And after being turned over to Calumet County Sheriff, did your department, that is the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, ever reassume responsibility for the scene or scene security? No. Mr. Herman, were you involved in the decisions or the discussion of turning over responsibility of this investigation to Calumet County, or was that done by somebody else? Yes, I was present during this exchange when we spoke with Sheriff Poggle. Let me ask, about how long after your arrival at that scene was it that Calumet County officials arrived? Approximately 40 to 45 minutes, 11:40, 11:45, I believe it was. Any time within that 40 or 45 minutes that you were there before Calumet County arrived, did you see any officers or any citizen, for that matter, either enter or in any way disturb that vehicle? No, nobody disturbed that vehicle during that time. That was something that was important to you. Is that right? That is correct, yes. Why? Because it is a vehicle we were looking for, potential evidence. We didn't want to disturb it. Did you have occasion, Mr. Herman, to meet with and speak with either Pam or Nicole Sturm on scene? Yes, I did. Describe their demeanor, generally, if you recall. They were very shook up, very upset that they found the vehicle. Now, do I understand that Sergeant Orth was already on scene when you got there? Yes. Who was the second officer to arrive? Was that you or was that somebody else? Myself and Detective Remacher were there right at the same time, shortly. We would have been the second officers on the scene within minutes we were there after Sergeant Orth. Can you tell the jury, please, who, other than Sheriff Jerry Poggle of the Calumet County Department, in fact, the sheriff, other than Mr. Poggle, who was involved in ultimately deciding whether this investigation or the scene would be transferred to another agency? Deputy Inspector Shedder, I spoke with. He, in turn, would have been in contact with Inspector Hermann of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, I had gotten that information from the deputy inspector. Basically, he discussed that matter with me. Okay, I'm kind of confused here. Are there two Hermans in the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department? There must be, because he said I would have been in contact with Inspector Hermann of that department. Maybe we'll get to that. The questioning then continues. All right. So you had some input into that decision. Is that right? Yes, I did. Lastly, Mr. Hermann, the scene or integrity of the SUV being Sergeant Orth's responsibility, was Sergeant Orth provided with any relief or any breaks while he was on that location? Yes, he was. And who provided breaks or brake relief for him? I did provide 2 breaks for Sergeant Orth during his visual observation of the vehicle. While providing those breaks, did you maintain constant visual contact then with the vehicle? Yes, I did. At any time during those 2 brief breaks, again, did any individual, citizen, or law enforcement officer enter or disturb that vehicle? No, nobody disturbed the vehicle. Attorney Kratz then says, that's all the questions I have of this witness, Your Honor. The court then says, Mr. Buting. And Mr. Buting, one of Steven's attorneys, does his cross-examination. Mr. Hermann, or do you go by Deputy Inspector Hermann? That is my current title, correct. I will call you Deputy Inspector Hermann. Thank you. Are you Inspector now? Deputy Inspector. Deputy Inspector, okay. Now, on November 5th of 2005, you were a lieutenant, right? That is correct. And you obviously knew Lieutenant James Link, right? Yes, I did. He was also a lieutenant in your department? Yes. Would you explain to me a little bit about the hierarchy back then? Who was at the top? Who was the top sheriff at that time? Sheriff Ken Peterson, okay? And immediately below him, second in command, would be who? Inspector Hermann, okay. And then that's Robert Hermann, right? Correct. A brother or relative? That's brother. That's your brother. Okay. Yes. Oh, see, now we have an answer. You would think the prosecution would have added this little piece of information because it is confusing, right? Okay. Anyway. And then does it branch down into one or more deputy inspectors? Yes. How many? There's a deputy inspector in charge of the jail, a deputy inspector in charge of patrol and investigative division, and deputy inspector in charge of our support. Okay. And so on November 5th of 2005, who were those 3 deputy inspectors? Shetter? Deputy Inspector Shetter was in charge of operations at that time. Okay. Deputy Inspector Larry Welnicke, I believe, Welnicke, Welnicke, was in charge of the jail. And I believe Deputy Inspector Bill Beck was in charge of support. Okay. And then the next level below, that is lieutenants? Yes. And how many lieutenants were there? 3 lieutenants. That would be yourself. In charge of, as far as the patrol division is concerned, there's 3 lieutenants. Myself, Lieutenant Seam, and I believe it was Lieutenant Bessler at the time. Okay. And that's, your division was the patrol division, right? Yes. And then is there also a lieutenant of the Detective Bureau? That's correct. Lieutenant James Link. So he would have been the top dog in the Detective Bureau at that time, basically, right? Yes. And you have already mentioned that his decision to transfer authority, but let me just make sure we're clear. You were aware about Mr. Avery's civil lawsuit against your department and Manitowoc County for the years that he spent on the wrongful conviction case, right? Yes. And the concern was pretty obvious to you as soon as this vehicle was discovered on his family's property that maybe there might be an appearance of a conflict, if not an actual conflict, for your department to be investigating this case. Isn't that right? Yes. By the way, were you deposed in that lawsuit? Did you go through any depositions yourself? No, I did not. Do you know did you know at that time whether or not Lieutenant James Link had gone through any depositions in that lawsuit? I'm not aware of that. I'm talking about November 5th right now, okay? Yes, you weren't aware of that, right? Whether or not Lieutenant Link had been Disposed in any, deposed, yes. Deposed in any of the civil litigation? Right. I'm not aware of it. And you were not aware of it then? No. What about Sergeant Andrew Colburn? Were you aware he had been deposed as a witness in that lawsuit? Not to my recollection. I don't recall if he was or if he was not. The same as far as Lieutenant Link. I don't recall if he was or if was not. So it's at that time. It's possible that you were aware of it. You are just not sure right now. Is that what you are telling me? I don't recall at this point. I don't recall if he was or was not. Okay. But okay, I'm going to stop. Do any of you listening actually believe that? This is a very small town. People talk. And this is a very tight-knit group of police officers. Do you really believe that not everybody in that department knew what had happened? Do you really believe that? Anyway, let's go ahead. Okay. But at any rate, it was pretty common knowledge. Would you say pretty much every member of the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department was aware of Mr. Avery's lawsuit against them? Oh, God, I really hadn't even read that. And yeah. Okay. And then his response is yes. Okay. Now, you talk about this decision to turn over the lead of this investigation of this case on November 5th, 2005. And you said that was about 45 minutes after the first officer arrived, right? Yes. So by 11:45 in the morning, the decision had already been made that you should pass this off to Calumet, right? Yes. The court then says, "Excuse me, Mr. Buting, I think you are just starting to get into something that I'm sure is going to continue for a while. So to help with the flow of things," and Attorney Buting says, "It might not, but that's okay. We can take a break now." And the court says, "We'll take our afternoon break at this time." Again, members of the jury do not discuss the case in any way during the break. And so at this point, the jury leaves for their break. The jury is not present at the time. And then the court says, "Counsel, then let's report back at 5 minutes to 3. Attorney Buting says, "Okay, and thank you." And a recess is taken. The jury is now back from their break. And the court says, "Okay, Mr. Buting, at this time, you may resume your cross-examination of the witness." And Attorney Buting says, "Thank you, Your Honor." And the cross-examination is then continued. I think we were talking about the decision to transfer the lead authority in the investigation to Calumet. Was it about 11:45 a.m., right? Yes. Actually, I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. But let me ask you this first. You parked, when you first pulled up into the southeast area of the salvage yard, you parked near the crusher. Is that right? Yes, somewhere in that general area. Yes. Okay. And did you look at that crusher? Did it appear to be in operating order, or could you tell? I don't know how it I know I have an idea of how it operates. Whether or not it was working at the time, it was not running when I arrived. Did you see a bunch of flattened, crushed cars stacked nearby? Yes, I did. Okay. And when you walked up to the Toyota RAV4, did you see any indication at all that maybe somebody had tried to crush it and failed, or had started to crush it and failed? No, I did not. It was completely intact as far as you could tell. Yes. Even though there was a crusher nearby that could have, if someone knew how to use it, could have been flattened that RAV4 to a pancake, right? If the crusher was working, yes, correct, they could. The vehicle could have been crushed. Okay. And if that would have been done to that RAV4, it would have been a pretty unrecognizable vehicle at that point, right? Unless you start ripping it apart. I don't know. As far as emblems or whatever would be visible, I guess I can't make assumptions unless you see a vehicle like that crushed. It would be a lot less recognizable than it was when you saw it. Yes, it would definitely change the appearance of it. Okay. And by that time, the news or word had been out on the media, the news, missing persons, posters spread all over the place that Teresa's vehicle was a Toyota RAV4, right? Yes. And you said, I think as you walked up to and maybe I'm confusing you with the prior witness, But as you approached the vehicle, it appeared as if somebody had been trying to conceal it. Yes, I did not testify to that, but it did appear that way to me. I'm sorry. I may be morphing you into the prior witness, but in fact, the effort to conceal it, this Toyota RAV4, wasn't that good, was it? I mean, it wasn't covered. No, not completely. And in fact, and then Attorney Buting says, Counsel, if you could put up that one right now, appreciate it. And then Attorney Buting continues his questioning. As you walked up to the rear of it, this is what you see. Great big letters, RAV4 Toyota, right? Yes. Attorney Kratz then says, Exhibit 29, Counsel? And Attorney Buting says, Exhibit 29, we're showing to the jury right now. And then Attorney Buting begins his questioning again. The hood that was leaning up against the side of the vehicle is over here on the right side of the picture, right? I'm not sure this is even in here, but there was a big vehicle hood leaning up against the passenger side, right? Yes. An old rusty piece of junk, correct? An old hood, yes. I believe it may be in the photo just to the right of the post, all the way over here. I believe that part of it there would be part of it, yes. Yes, it was right up against it. Now, if that hood had been pulled up against the back of this vehicle, you wouldn't be able to see the tire cover that says RAV4 Toyota, would you? No, you would not have been able to. Okay. And this vehicle was along that little ridge where all of the other vehicles were single file parked, nose to bumper, nose to bumper. And this was the only one that was double parked, right? Too deep, sticking out. I'm not sure how many vehicles were double parked or single parked, but this one was double parked, correct? Okay. Attorney Buting then says, could we maybe put up that number 89, what we were looking at before? That one, the aerial view. Any aerial of that area is fine. There we go. Thank you. Attorney Kratzen says, want me to zoom in? And Attorney Buting says, one more. And then he continues his questioning. Okay, so looking at that line of vehicles that is parked along the berm on the north or the south side of the pond there, all the rest of those vehicles look like they're single. Any other double parked? Yes, it appears that way, that they are single parked. Okay. Attorney Buting then says, this is Exhibit 86 for the record. Thank you. And the court says, Counsel, excuse me for a second. Can at least one attorney from each side approach? And then a sidebar is taken, and the questioning continues. We better clear something up, Lieutenant. This photograph was taken after the Toyota RAV4 had already been removed from the scene, correct? I don't know when it was taken. Attorney Kratz then says, actually, Judge, we'll stipulate to that fact. We'll complete the record later, but that is a stipulation that we're willing to not only alert the jury, but the witness at this time. And the court says, for the benefit of the record and the jurors' counsel, do I understand, and I know there's been a series of aerial photos introduced, do I understand that all of those photos were taken after the date that the vehicle was removed from the scene? Attorney Kratz says yes. Attorney Buting says that's correct. The court says both parties understanding. Attorney Buting says yes. There are no, at least that we have seen so far. We have not seen any aerial shots with the RAV4 still in this location. And the court says thank you. Attorney Buting says okay, and then continues his questioning. But do you recall where it was? Well, actually, we'll leave that for another witness. So after you approached that 3 to 7 feet, you said, from the vehicle, you didn't actually look inside the vehicle yourself, right? I did not. No. Okay. And then you retreated back to where the cars were parked? Yes. And then you had some other duties that you attended to. You mentioned that you gave Sergeant Orth a couple of breaks, I think. Yes, I did. But in between those times, there was an hour or more in between that. You were doing other things, right? I was standing by in that area. Yes. Okay. But for instance, you were talking with Deputy Inspector Shutter. Yes. And I believe you said Detective Remacher and Sheriff Poggle. And you were going through that whole decision-making process about transferring authority, lead authority over to Calumet, right? Yes. And so there was a meeting going on down there, and you guys were focused on that, right? Yes, we were in that discussion. Correct. And you also, for a period of time, spoke with Earl Avery, right? Yes, I did. He, after seeing all the congregation down there, whatever, he started coming down on a four-wheel. What do you call those? ATVs? Yes, he did. Okay. And then, so you asked him some questions about the crusher? Yes, I did. And then at some point, first, do you know how long it was before you left the car crusher area and retreated to the command post that was being set up over by the entranceway to Avery Road? And without looking at a report, I do not recall the time that I left the area of the car crusher. Well, I'm not sure that the report will help, but I will let you take a look at it. Maybe it will refresh your location. It's page 10 and 11 of 22. I did not have a time listed as to what time we left that area and went back to the car or the end of Avery Road. Okay. But do you think it was an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours? You don't have any recollection today about how long that was? No. At some point you did, though, retreat to the area that later a command post was put up there right at the entrance to the business area, right? Yes. Okay. But before that, there was an incident that occurred. Attorney Buting then says, if you could put number 86 back up for a moment, just at that distance is fine, I think. Attorney Kratz says, like this? Buting says, yeah, just leave it that way. And then he continues. There was an incident that occurred where it turned out that there were a number of civilians who had somehow managed to find their way onto the Avery property, right? I don't believe it was onto the Avery property. It was into the car area. It was to the south of the car area. But it turned out there was like 4 or 5 people walking in, approaching from the south through the gravel pit, right? Yes. Is that right? Yes. And it turned out that these were friends of Teresa trying to help. Nothing wrong with that. They were just seeing if they could help, right? They were part of a search team. Yes. Okay. And they actually got all the way up to the southwest area there was no perimeter guard at the southwest area of the 40-acre lot at that time, right? Correct. There was not. And when you talked to them, they were all the way over by the gravel conveyor by that time, correct? Yes. All right. Did you put a guard in there at that point on the southwest area, or did that come later? I did not, and I'm not aware of any guard that was placed there. I did not put anybody up there. Okay. That wasn't your responsibility. Somebody else may have, but you had nothing to do with any of that. Correct. Okay. Just a couple of other things to clear up. Even though the decision was made to transfer lead authority at 11:45 of the overall investigation, that's not when your department transferred security supervision of the RAV4 area, is it? No, it is not. In fact, that didn't take place until 2:45 when Sergeant Orth was replaced by, that didn't take place until 3:04 p.m. when Calumet Sergeant Tyson relieved Deputy Cummings of your department. Is that right? Correct, yes. So for the first 4 hours that vehicle was sitting on the Avery property, after having been discovered by a member of your department, after a member of your department arrived, it was under the immediate control of members of the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department, correct? Yes. Attorney Buting then says, all right, thank you. The court says, Mr. Kratz. Attorney Kratz says, I just have got a few. And the redirect is being done by Attorney Kratz. I'm just going to clear up one thing, Mr. Hermann. Exhibit number 86. I'm going to zoom into the area. Do you recall where the RAV4 was parked as you look at this exhibit? Or if I show you a picture of the RAV4 as Miss Sturm took it, would that assist you? That would assist me. I will show you what has been received into evidence as Exhibit 33. I will just find it and we will be all set. Exhibit 33, you see a red truck to the left, which would be the south of that vehicle. Is that correct? That is correct, yes. Now I want to go back to exhibit number 86 and zoom in again. You can see the red truck kind of in the middle of that lane. Is that right? Yes, that's where it would be parked. Does that refresh your recollection? Yes. That the RAV4 would have been closest to the pond or south of that location, about where my cursor for my computer is at this time. Is that right? Correct. Attorney Kratz then says, with that clarification, then Judge, that's all I have of this witness. And the court says, anything else from the defense? Attorney Buting says, none, Your Honor. The court says, all right, the witness is excused. Members of the jury, at this time, counsel and I have a matter to take up in chambers, so we're going to take a break at this time. I will have to let you know whether we'll be resuming with additional testimony today or whether you will be excused early. But we'll get the message to you in the jury room as soon as we know. If this is our final farewell for the day, I remind you again not to watch any news, media accounts of this case, or discuss it with anyone in any manner. Thank you. And then the jury leaves. The jury is not present. And the court says, before we go off the record, I want to reflect that the court asked the parties for a brief sidebar conference, and the sole purpose of that conference was to clarify what the court had previously understood to be the agreement of the parties, and that is that all of the aerial photos which have been shown to the jury to date were, in fact, taken after the RAV4 had been removed from the property. I had brought that issue up to the attorneys earlier because I didn't think it had been made clear to the jurors when the photos were taken, and I didn't want to have them looking for something that wasn't there. And I believe that the parties indicated previously at some point that would be placed on the record. And I just asked the attorneys if today was the day. Anything else, counsel, before we break? Attorney Kratz says no. Attorney Buting says no. And the court says, I will see you in chambers. And at this point, the proceedings for this day are concluded. All right, that wraps up day 4 of testimony and our look at what Deputy Inspector Todd Hermann had to say. You know, we've heard so often, especially when asked questions by the defense, if a time was written on a report for when they did or did not do something, or if there were notes taken. And so often we hear the answer, I don't recall, or I don't remember. Very convenient. We're also still expected to believe that the integrity of this scene was protected. But then we learn that civilians who were searching, just give them that, they were searching, but they wandered onto the lot from the gravel pit because nobody was guarding it. Come on. And, you know, let's not ignore this massive elephant in the courtroom, Steven Avery's lawsuit. Everyone in that department knew about it. So the idea that nobody remembers who was deposed or when, this just doesn't pass the bullshit test. In the next episode, we're going to hear from Julie Kramer. She is or was at the time a dog handler for Great Lakes Search and Rescue Canine, who helped in part of the search on the Avery yard. She brought in the cadaver dogs to search the location. Her testimony is actually quite long, so get ready for that one. If you're enjoying the series, make sure you hit that subscribe or follow button wherever you're listening. It helps more than you know, and it makes sure that you don't miss a single damn thing that happens in this case. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.